The morning was colder than anyone could remember. The ground was covered in thick snow, and every tree looked like it was dressed in white. The air was so cold that people hardly came out of their homes. In a small wooden cabin at the edge of town lived a man named Tom. He was a quiet and kind man who liked to help others whenever he could. He worked as a mail carrier, so he had to go out even on the coldest days. That morning, Tom woke up before sunrise. His small cabin was freezing inside, so he quickly made a fire and warmed his hands. He looked out the window and saw how white the world had become overnight. He sighed softly, put on his thick jacket, wrapped a scarf around his neck, and stepped outside. His boots made deep marks in the snow as he walked toward his old truck parked near the road. The street was silent. Only the sound of the wind and the crunch of snow under his feet could be heard. As he walked toward the gate, something caught his eye. A small shape was lying on the side of the road near the frozen bushes. At first, Tom thought it might be a bag or a pile of clothes someone dropped. But when he looked closer, he noticed a small movement. His heart began to beat faster. He walked quickly toward it. When he got close, he saw that it was a dog. The poor creature was half covered with snow. Its fur was frozen stiff and it was shaking weakly. Tom knelt beside the dog and gently brushed the snow off its body. The dog's eyes were half open, and its breathing was slow and shallow. It looked like it had been lying there all night trying to survive the freezing cold. Tom placed his hand on the dog's chest and felt a very weak heartbeat. The animal was still alive. Without thinking twice, he took off his jacket and wrapped it around the shivering dog. The dog made a faint sound as if trying to respond. Tom's hands were numb from the cold, but he didn't care. He lifted the small cold body into his arms and hurried back to his cabin. When he entered the cabin, the warm air from the fire touched his face, and he quickly laid the dog near the fireplace. He added more wood to make the fire stronger. Then he brought a blanket from his bed and wrapped the dog tightly to give it more warmth. He sat beside it and waited, hoping the animal would start moving again. Minutes passed slowly. The dog didn't move much, only let out small sounds now and then. Tom went to the kitchen, warmed some water, and poured it into a small bowl. He returned to the fireplace and placed the bowl near the dog's mouth. The dog's nose twitched a little, and it licked the warm water slowly. That small movement made Tom smile. He softly rubbed the dog's fur to help it get warmer. Bit by bit, the dog's body stopped shaking. The morning light entered through the small window, and the cabin looked brighter. Tom could now see the dog more clearly. Its fur was white and brown, though dirty and tangled with ice. It looked like a stray or maybe a lost pet. Its eyes were soft brown and full of fear and sadness. Tom felt something warm in his heart. He had lived alone for years, and now this small life needed his help. By the afternoon, the dog could lift its head and look around. Tom brought some pieces of bread and small bits of meat, hoping the dog could eat. The dog sniffed at the food and began to eat slowly. Tom smiled again. "Good boy," he said in a calm voice. "You are going to be fine." The dog wagged its tail just a little. Tom laughed softly. "You need a name," he said. After thinking for a moment, he added, "I'll call you Buddy." Buddy seemed to like the name because his tail moved again. For the rest of the day, Tom stayed near Buddy, feeding him and keeping the fire strong. Every time he looked at the small creature sleeping by the fire, he felt a strange peace. The cabin didn't feel so empty anymore. The sound of the crackling fire and Buddy's soft breathing made it feel like home again. As the evening came, Tom sat in his old chair with a cup of tea in his hands. Buddy lay beside his feet, resting comfortably. The man looked down at him and whispered, "You are a brave little one." But in the back of his mind, Tom could not stop thinking about something. When he found Buddy lying in the snow earlier, he had noticed something unusual beneath the dog. It looked like the ground there had been disturbed, like there was something hidden under the snow. At the time, he ignored it because the dog needed help, but now the thought returned to him. The next morning, the sky was clear and sunlight made the snow shine. Tom put on his coat and boots again. Buddy watched him with curious eyes. "I'll be right back," Tom said gently and stepped outside. The air was still cold, but not as harsh as before. He walked back to the same spot where he had found Buddy. The area looked calm, but Tom's curiosity pushed him to look closer. He knelt down and brushed the snow away with his hands. The ground was frozen, but after some effort, he noticed something hard under the ice. He cleared more snow, and slowly a corner of a small metal box appeared. It was old and covered with dirt. Tom dug around it carefully until he could lift it out of the frozen ground. The box was heavy and cold to the touch. There was a rusty lock on it. Tom looked around, but there was no one in sight. He held the box tightly and started walking back to his cabin. Buddy barked softly as soon as Tom opened the door. "Look what I found," Tom said with a smile. He placed the box on the wooden table and sat down beside it. The surface of the box had faded markings, and it looked like it had been buried for many years. Tom tried to open it, but the lock was too weak and rusted. He fetched a small hammer from the drawer and tapped it gently. The lock broke easily. He slowly lifted the lid and looked inside. There were a few old objects wrapped in cloth. He opened one piece and found a shiny metal. It still glowed even after so many years. Then he found an old photograph inside a metal frame. In the photo, there was a young man wearing a uniform. Beside him stood a dog that looked exactly like Buddy. Tom stared at the picture in disbelief. He looked down at Buddy, who was sitting near his chair and looking up at him with those same brown eyes. It was as if the dog already knew what was inside the box. Tom felt confused but also amazed. The metal, the photograph, and the buried box seemed to tell a story that was hidden for a long time, and somehow Buddy was part of it. Tom sat silently, still holding the photo in his hand. He wondered who the man in the picture was and what the box meant. But one thing was clear to him. Buddy was not just an ordinary stray dog. He was connected to something much deeper, something waiting to be discovered. Tom sat on his wooden chair, still holding the photograph in his hand. The picture showed a young man in a military uniform standing proudly beside a dog that looked exactly like Buddy. The more he stared at the photo, the more questions filled his mind. Who was the man in the picture? How long had this box been buried under the snow? And how did Buddy end up there, lying above it as if protecting it? Buddy sat near the fireplace watching Tom quietly. His eyes followed every movement, almost as if he understood what was going on. Tom placed the photo carefully on the table and looked at the other things in the box. There were some letters tied together with a faded ribbon, an old key, and a small leather tag with writing on it. Tom picked up the tag and read the name carved on it. It said Max. He looked at Buddy and whispered, "Is that your real name, boy?" Buddy tilted his head and wagged his tail slowly as if answering yes. Tom smiled softly, but his mind was still full of thoughts. He untied the old letters and began to read the first one. The paper was yellow and the ink had faded, but the words were still clear enough to read. The letter began with, "Dear Mother, I am safe here with Max. He has been my best friend since the day I joined the army." As Tom continued reading, he realized that the young man in the photograph was a soldier who had written these letters to his mother during a war many years ago. Each letter spoke about life at the camp, about how loyal Max was and how the dog saved him from danger more than once. The soldier's name was Henry. Tom felt a wave of emotion as he read those words. He imagined Henry and Max together, facing hard times but never giving up. There was a strong bond between them, something that went beyond just friendship. When Tom finished reading the letters, he looked again at Buddy. Could Buddy really be connected to the same dog from the photo? It sounded impossible, but there was something mysterious in the way Buddy behaved. He was calm, intelligent, and seemed to sense everything around him. Tom decided to visit the town library the next day. Maybe he could find some information about Henry or his family. That night he placed the photo, the letters, and the medal carefully back into the box. Then he sat near the fire with Buddy by his side. The dog rested his head on Tom's foot, and the man gently stroked his fur. He whispered, "Don't worry, boy. We'll find out who you are." The next morning, the sky was clear and sunlight reflected brightly on the snow. Tom dressed warmly, packed the box in a small bag, and walked toward his truck. Buddy wanted to come along, but Tom decided it was better to leave him resting by the warm fire. He patted Buddy's head and said, "Stay home and wait for me." Buddy barked softly as if agreeing. The library was a small stone building in the center of town. Inside it was quiet and warm. The old librarian, Mrs. Green, greeted Tom with a kind smile. "Good morning, Tom. What brings you here today?" she asked. Tom placed the box on the table and showed her the photograph. "Do you know anything about this man?" he asked. Mrs. Green adjusted her glasses and looked closely. Her eyes widened a little. "Oh, this looks like Henry Woods," she said slowly. "He was a soldier who lived here many years ago. Everyone in town knew about him. He never came back from the war." Tom listened carefully as she continued speaking. "Henry was a brave young man. He had a dog named Max. People said they were inseparable. After Henry left for the war, his mother received letters from him for a few years. But one day the letters stopped. Later, the army sent a message that Henry was missing in action. His mother never recovered from the news. She used to walk to the edge of the forest every evening, hoping her son and his dog would return. Mrs. Green sighed softly and shook her head. She passed away years ago. Tom felt sadness in his heart. He looked at the photograph again and then at the medal. "So this box must belong to Henry," he said. "It was buried near my cabin." Mrs. Green nodded slowly. Maybe his mother buried it. She used to live near that area before her house was destroyed by a fire. She said she buried Henry's things to keep his memory safe. Tom thanked Mrs. Green and left the library, feeling both amazed and emotional. The story made him think deeply. He drove back home with the box beside him. When he reached his cabin, Buddy came running to the door, wagging his tail happily. Tom smiled and picked him up gently. "Buddy, I found out about Henry and Max," he said softly. The dog looked at him with calm eyes, as if he already knew the story. Tom placed the box back on the table and sat down beside the fire. He looked at Buddy and said, "If you are Max, then you must have been guarding this box for a reason." Buddy lay down and rested his head on Tom's knee. The man felt a strange comfort, as if the dog was telling him he was exactly where he belonged. That night, something unusual happened. Tom was half asleep when he heard soft scratching near the door. He got up and opened it. Buddy was standing outside looking toward the woods. The dog took a few steps forward, then turned back as if asking Tom to follow. Tom grabbed his coat and flashlight and followed Buddy through the snow. The dog walked slowly but surely, stopping now and then to look back. They walked for nearly 10 minutes until they reached an old wooden post near a group of tall trees. Buddy stopped there and started digging in the snow with his paws. Tom knelt beside him and helped. After a few minutes, they uncovered a small wooden cross buried beneath the snow. It had a name carved into it, Henry Woods. Tom froze for a moment. He realized that this must be the place where Henry's body had been laid to rest long ago. He looked at Buddy, who was sitting silently beside the grave, his head lowered. Tom felt tears in his eyes. He understood now why Buddy had been lying above that buried box. The dog had stayed near this place to guard the memory of his old master. Even in the freezing cold, he had refused to leave. Tom whispered, "You are a loyal friend, Buddy." The dog looked up at him and wagged his tail gently. Tom stood there for a while, the light from his flashlight shining softly on the grave. He promised himself that he would take care of Buddy for the rest of his life. As they walked back to the cabin, the night sky was full of stars, and the snow glowed under the moonlight. Tom felt peaceful inside. He knew that somehow the bond between Henry and his dog had not been broken by time. It had simply found a new home. When they returned to the cabin, Tom placed the medal and photo on the shelf near the fireplace. The warm light reflected on the medal, making it shine like a small star. Buddy curled up beside the fire and Tom whispered, "You are safe now and your story will never be forgotten." He looked at the sleeping dog and smiled. He didn't know how long Buddy had been wandering in the cold or how he had survived, but he knew one thing. This dog had a heart full of love and loyalty. And now, after so many years, both Buddy and Henry's memory had found peace. The next morning was calm and bright. Sunlight touched the snow outside Tom's cabin, making it sparkle like glass. The fire had burned low and Buddy was still sleeping near it. Tom stood by the window holding a cup of tea in his hands. His mind was full of thoughts about what had happened the night before. The small wooden cross in the woods, the old box, the letters, and the photograph had all connected like pieces of a puzzle. But Tom still felt there was more to this story, something he had not yet understood. He looked down at Buddy, who woke up and stretched lazily before walking toward him. Tom smiled and knelt beside him. "Good morning, Buddy," he said softly. The dog wagged his tail and rubbed his head against Tom's leg. Tom poured some food into a bowl and placed it near the fire. Buddy began to eat happily while Tom sat down at the table and opened one of Henry's old letters again. He wanted to read them more carefully this time. In the letters, Henry had written about his missions, his hopes, and how much he missed home. He had also mentioned something strange. In one letter, Henry said he had hidden something valuable in a safe place before leaving for his final mission. He didn't write what it was, only that it was meant to be found by someone who truly cared. Tom looked at that line again and again. Could it be that the metal box and the grave were only part of a larger secret? Tom decided to visit Mrs. Green again to ask more questions. He put on his coat and gloves, called Buddy, and the two set out together this time. The town looked peaceful under the winter sun. When they reached the library, Mrs. Green welcomed them warmly. Buddy sat quietly beside Tom's chair while he showed her the letter and asked, "Do you know what Henry might have meant by this hidden thing he mentioned?" Mrs. Green adjusted her glasses and thought for a moment. "I do remember hearing something from my grandmother," she said slowly. "People used to say that Henry carried something very special during the war. Some said it was a map. Others said it was a message from his captain. No one ever found out the truth because Henry never came back." Tom listened carefully, his curiosity growing stronger. Mrs. Green continued, "If Henry really hid something, it must still be near where he lived, or where he used to train with his dog. Maybe the forest near your cabin holds more than just memories." Tom thanked her and left the library, thinking deeply about her words. On the way back, he stopped by the small town store and bought a metal detector. He felt a little silly doing it, but something in his heart told him this was important. When he returned to his cabin, he put the device together and checked the batteries. Buddy watched him curiously, tilting his head as if wondering what new adventure they were starting. The next morning, Tom and Buddy headed toward the forest. The air was cold and their breath made small clouds in the air. They began near the wooden cross where they had been the night before. Tom turned on the detector and began sweeping it over the snow-covered ground. The machine made small beeping sounds, but nothing strong enough to mean anything important. They kept walking deeper into the forest, where the snow was thicker and the trees stood tall like silent guards. After an hour of searching, Buddy suddenly stopped and started barking. He began to dig at a spot near an old tree stump. Tom hurried over and pointed the detector there. The device started beeping loudly. Tom's heart began to race. He knelt and brushed away the snow. Beneath it, he found a flat stone with markings on it. He cleaned it with his gloves and saw carved initials, HW. It was Henry Woods again. Tom looked around and saw that the ground beside the stone was slightly raised. He took a small shovel from his bag and started digging carefully. Buddy helped by pawing at the snow. After a few minutes, they uncovered another small box, this one made of wood and wrapped in a cloth that had turned dark with age. Tom lifted it out gently and carried it back to the cabin. Inside the warm cabin, Tom placed the wooden box on the table. He hesitated for a moment, feeling a strange sense of excitement. Buddy sat beside him, watching closely. Tom slowly untied the old cloth and opened the lid. Inside were several papers, a small notebook, and a round object covered in dust. He picked up the notebook first and opened it. It was Henry's diary. The first few pages were full of notes about daily life in the army, about his friends, and about Max, his dog. But as Tom read further, the writing became more personal. Henry had written about a secret mission and how he had been asked to deliver something valuable back home. The diary said he had buried it near his mother's house in case something happened to him. The last line read, "If anyone finds this, please take care of Max. He knows where to lead you." Tom closed the diary and looked at Buddy. His heart felt heavy and amazed at the same time. Henry had trusted his dog to protect his memory and maybe even this secret. Tom picked up the round object from the box and cleaned it. It was a small golden compass with a strange symbol on the back. When he pressed the side button, the top opened to reveal a message engraved inside. It said, "To my loyal friend Max, you will always find your way home." Tom's eyes filled with emotion. The compass was not just an object. It was a message of love and trust between Henry and his dog. He placed it carefully on the table and whispered, "You did find your way home, Buddy." The dog wagged his tail and rested his head on Tom's leg. It was as if he understood every word. That evening, Tom decided to visit the mayor's office to share what he had found. The next day, he met with the mayor, Mr. Harris, and told him the whole story. Mr. Harris listened with great interest and said, "This is an important discovery. Henry Woods was a hero of this town. People will be happy to know his story has finally come to light." The mayor suggested creating a small memorial near the forest to honor Henry and Max. Tom agreed with a warm smile. When Tom returned home, he felt proud but also peaceful. He knew Henry's story would finally be remembered. He placed the diary, letters, medal, and compass together in a glass box on a shelf near the fireplace. It became the heart of his small cabin. Whenever visitors came, Tom told them the story of Henry and Max, the soldier and his loyal friend who never gave up. That night, as Tom sat beside the fire, Buddy lay beside him, his eyes half closed. The cabin was quiet except for the sound of burning wood. Tom looked at the golden compass shining softly under the light and thought about how strange life could be. A simple act of kindness had led him to uncover a story lost in time. He realized that sometimes helping one small life could open the door to something far greater. He looked down at Buddy and said gently, "You were meant to be found. You brought your master's story home." Buddy wagged his tail and gave a soft bark. Tom smiled and leaned back in his chair, feeling thankful. He knew that from that day on, he and Buddy would never be alone again. The next few days passed peacefully for Tom and Buddy. The story of Henry Woods and his loyal dog had quietly spread around the small town. People began visiting Tom's cabin to see the medal, letters, and compass that had been found in the frozen ground. Everyone was touched by the story of friendship and loyalty between a man and his dog. The mayor had already announced plans to build a small memorial near the forest where Henry's cross stood. Tom felt proud, but also thoughtful. Every time he looked at the photograph of Henry and Max, he felt a strange connection, as if the story was not yet complete. He still wondered how Buddy had survived all those years and why he looked so much like the dog in the photo. It was something he could not explain, yet it filled him with deep respect for the little creature that had brought so much change into his quiet life. One afternoon, while Tom was sitting near the fire reading Henry's diary again, there was a soft knock at his door. He opened it and found an old man standing outside, leaning on a wooden stick. He wore a thick coat and a woolen cap. His face was wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and kind. "Are you Tom?" the man asked politely. Tom nodded and welcomed him inside. The old man looked around the cabin and his eyes rested on the glass box that held Henry's belongings. "I heard you found something that once belonged to Henry Woods," the old man said slowly. "Yes, I did," Tom replied. "Are you from his family?" The man smiled faintly. "Not exactly," he said. "But I knew Henry. We were in the same unit during the war. My name is Peter." Tom was surprised. He quickly offered the man a chair near the fire. Peter sat down, warming his hands. "I never thought I would see these things again," he said quietly, looking at the medal and letters. "Henry and I were close friends. He used to talk about his dog Max all the time. He said that Max was more than just a dog. He was like a part of his soul." Tom listened carefully as Peter continued. "When our unit was attacked, Henry sent me away with a message for his mother. He told me that if he didn't return, I should find Max and make sure he was safe. But I never saw Max again. Years later, I came back to this town, but Henry's mother had already passed away. I searched for clues, but I found nothing. And now, after so many years, here I am sitting in front of the same dog I once saw with Henry." Tom frowned slightly. "What do you mean by that?" he asked. Peter looked at Buddy, who was sitting quietly beside the fireplace, his eyes watching both men. "I know it sounds impossible," Peter said softly. "But that dog looks exactly like Max. The same eyes, the same mark on the neck, and the same calm look. I don't understand how it can be, but it feels like he is the same dog." Tom looked at Buddy with surprise. He had also noticed the small mark on Buddy's neck before, but never thought much of it. Could it really be possible that this was the same dog Henry had all those years ago? That would mean Buddy was far older than any normal dog could live. Tom didn't know what to think. Peter continued speaking. "There are things in this world we cannot explain, Tom. Sometimes love and loyalty are stronger than time itself." Tom sat silently for a while, trying to understand everything he had just heard. He looked at Buddy, who wagged his tail slowly, as if agreeing with Peter's words. The room felt warm and peaceful, yet filled with mystery. Peter smiled gently. "Henry would be happy knowing his dog and his story have finally found peace," he said softly. Tom nodded. "I think Buddy has been waiting for this moment for a long time," he said. Peter stayed for dinner, and the two men shared stories about Henry in the old days. Tom listened with great interest as Peter described Henry's bravery and kindness. It felt as if Henry was alive again in those memories. When Peter left that evening, he patted Buddy's head and whispered, "You did well, Max." After Peter left, Tom sat by the fire again, deep in thought. He took out the compass and turned it over in his hands. The message inside still shone clearly under the light. "You will always find your way home." The words touched his heart. Maybe Buddy had found his way back home through fate, to the very place where Henry had once lived. Tom felt thankful that destiny had chosen him to be a part of this story. The next morning, Tom received a letter from the mayor's office. It said that the memorial ceremony for Henry Woods and Max would be held that weekend. The whole town was invited. Tom felt honored when the mayor requested that he and Buddy be part of the ceremony. He smiled and looked down at the dog. "We have one more thing to do, my friend," he said. When the day of the ceremony arrived, the forest looked beautiful under the soft winter sunlight. People from the town gathered around the small clearing where the wooden cross had stood. Now a new stone monument had been placed there. It had Henry's name engraved on it, along with a picture of a soldier and his loyal dog. Flowers were placed around the stone, and the air was filled with quiet respect. Tom stood near the front with Buddy beside him. The mayor gave a short speech about Henry's bravery and loyalty. He spoke about how a man's friendship with his dog could survive through time, and how kindness and courage could bring light even after many years. When the speech ended, Tom stepped forward and placed Henry's medal and compass at the base of the monument. The people clapped softly, and a few had tears in their eyes. Buddy sat beside Tom quietly, his eyes fixed on the monument. Then, to everyone's surprise, he walked forward, placed his paw gently on the stone, and sat down. The crowd went silent for a moment. It was as if Buddy was saying goodbye to his old master. The scene touched every heart. Tom's eyes were wet, but he smiled proudly. He whispered, "You did it, Buddy." After the ceremony, people came to thank Tom for sharing the story. Many said they would never forget what they had seen that day. The mayor promised that the town would care for the memorial forever. Tom and Buddy walked back to the cabin together as the sun began to set. The snow glowed golden in the evening light, and the air felt calm. That night, Tom sat by the fire once again. He looked at the empty space on his shelf where the medal and compass used to be. He didn't feel sad. Instead, he felt peace knowing they were where they belonged. Buddy lay beside him, resting quietly. Tom gently petted his head and whispered, "You can rest now, Buddy. Your duty is done." The fire burned softly and the cabin was filled with warm light. Tom closed his eyes for a moment and thought about how one simple act of kindness had led him to uncover a story of love, courage, and loyalty that had been hidden under the snow. He knew his life had changed forever, not just because he had found a dog, but because he had found a purpose. As the night grew deeper, the sound of the wind outside faded. Tom looked once more at Buddy, who was already sleeping peacefully. The man smiled and whispered, "Good night, my friend." He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for sure. Buddy had come into his life for a reason, and that reason had been fulfilled. Days passed peacefully after the ceremony. Tom's life returned to its calm rhythm, yet something deep inside him had changed. The story of Henry and Max had left a mark on his heart. Every time he looked at the stone monument in the forest, he felt proud that he had played a small part in giving peace to two souls that had waited for so long. The town also seemed to carry a new sense of warmth. People often visited the memorial to leave flowers or simply stand quietly and think about the meaning of loyalty and friendship. Tom and Buddy continued their simple life in the cabin. The snow outside was slowly melting as winter started to fade. The days grew brighter and the birds began to return. Buddy spent his mornings sitting near the window, watching the forest with calm eyes. Tom often smiled, wondering what his loyal companion might be thinking. He had learned that sometimes animals carried wisdom that humans could never understand. One evening, while Tom was preparing dinner, he noticed Buddy walking slowly toward the door. The dog stopped for a moment, looked back at Tom, and wagged his tail softly. Tom walked over and opened the door for him. The cold air came rushing in, and Buddy stepped outside, moving toward the forest path. Tom followed him quietly. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The snow glistened under the soft light, and the forest looked peaceful. Buddy walked ahead until he reached the small clearing where the stone monument stood. He stopped there and sat down in front of it. Tom came closer and stood beside him. He could feel something special in the air, a quiet stillness that touched his heart. Buddy looked at the stone for a long time, then turned his head toward Tom as if trying to say something. Tom knelt beside him and petted his head gently. "You came to say goodbye, didn't you?" he whispered. Buddy looked up once more at the monument, his eyes shining in the fading light. Then he slowly lay down beside the stone, Tom watched quietly as his loyal friend closed his eyes, looking calm and peaceful. The wind blew softly through the trees, carrying a faint sound that almost felt like a whisper. For a moment it was as if the spirit of Henry Woods was there, watching over them both. Tom stayed there until the stars appeared in the sky. The forest was silent except for the gentle sound of the wind. He placed his hand on Buddy's back and spoke softly. "You've done enough, my friend. Rest well." He felt grateful for every moment they had shared. Though sadness touched his heart, it was filled with peace. He knew that Buddy had found the place where he truly belonged. The next morning, the town came together once again. People helped Tom bury Buddy beside Henry's monument. The mayor said a few kind words, and everyone bowed their heads in silence. Tom placed a wooden sign at the spot, carved with simple words, "Buddy, loyal friend and brave heart." The townspeople agreed to care for the place as part of the memorial. The story of Henry, Max, and Buddy became a tale that parents told their children, reminding them about kindness and the power of loyalty. As spring arrived, the forest turned green again. Flowers began to bloom around the monument, and small birds built nests in the nearby trees. Tom often visited the place to sit quietly and think. Each time he came, he felt calm and hopeful. Life had taught him many lessons, but this story had taught him the greatest one of all, that love and loyalty could live beyond time. One afternoon, while Tom was walking back from the town, he noticed a small shape moving near the edge of the forest. When he came closer, he saw a tiny puppy struggling to walk through the grass. The puppy was shivering and looked weak. Tom bent down and gently picked it up. The little creature licked his hand softly. Tom smiled and said, "Well, hello there, little one." He carried the puppy back to his cabin, wrapped it in a blanket, and gave it some warm milk. The puppy looked up at him with trusting eyes. Tom felt a familiar warmth in his heart, the same feeling he had the day he found Buddy. He knew it was not a coincidence. Maybe it was life giving him another chance to care, to love, and to share his heart again. Tom decided to name the puppy Hope. The name felt right because that was what the little one had brought into his life once again. From that day, Hope became part of Tom's small world. She followed him everywhere, running around the cabin and playing in the yard. Her presence filled the place with laughter and joy. The silence that had once filled Tom's days was now replaced with happy sounds of barking and playful footsteps. The townspeople often came to visit. They smiled when they saw Tom and Hope together. Many said that it felt as if Buddy's spirit was still there, watching over them both. Some evenings, Tom would walk with Hope to the memorial site. He would sit on the same rock where he used to sit with Buddy and tell the puppy stories about Henry and Max. Though Hope couldn't understand the words, she listened quietly, her ears twitching as if she knew every emotion behind them. As time passed, the memorial became a symbol of friendship for the entire town. Every year, people gathered there to celebrate a day they called Loyal Hearts Day. It was a day to remember Henry, Max, and Buddy, and to honor all the bonds between humans and animals. Children brought flowers and old people shared stories. The mayor gave speeches about courage, and the townsfolk always felt inspired. Tom often stood quietly at the back, smiling proudly. Years went by and Tom grew older. His hair turned gray and his steps became slower, but his heart remained full of peace. Hope stayed with him always, faithful and loving. On quiet nights, Tom would sit by the fireplace, looking at the small wooden carving of Buddy he had placed on the shelf. He would smile softly and say, "You'll always be here, my friend." Then he would look down at Hope sleeping beside his chair and feel thankful that life had given him a second chance to love. One morning, the forest was filled with the sound of birds singing. Tom took his usual walk with Hope to the monument. He sat on the same rock and watched the sunlight dance through the trees. The air was fresh and the flowers around the memorial swayed gently in the breeze. He felt calm and happy, surrounded by the quiet beauty of nature. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. From the day he found Buddy frozen in the snow to the day he found Hope, his life had been full of unexpected blessings. He realized that sometimes, when people show kindness without expecting anything in return, the universe rewards them in beautiful ways. As he opened his eyes and looked at the monument, he whispered softly, "Thank you, Henry, thank you, Max, and thank you, Buddy." A gentle wind passed through the forest, touching his face like a kind hand. He smiled, feeling as if his old friends were still there with him, happy and free. When Tom and Hope returned to the cabin that evening, the sky was glowing with colors of gold and pink. Tom sat on the porch with his cup of tea while Hope played nearby. The peace of the moment wrapped around him like a warm blanket. He realized that life was not about how long it lasted, but about how much love and meaning one could give and receive. As the stars began to appear, Tom looked up at the sky and said quietly, "Some friendships never end. They just change shape." Hope came and rested her head on his knee, looking up at him with trusting eyes. Tom smiled and whispered, "You're part of that story now." The forest grew quiet again, filled with the soft hum of night. The fire in the cabin glowed through the window, and Tom sat there, surrounded by peace, love, and memories that would live forever.